Welcome back to the Gun Culture Radio Show, which, as you guys may know now, is the name of the radio show slash podcast that I'm doing. I mean, technically, it's not a radio show; it's really a podcast, but it's my show. I can call it whatever I want, right? And so it's been this episode and the last episode, number six. Number seven. Episode number 7 has been uploaded to Libsyn, which is a podcast hosting service. Eventually, the link will be in the description, so you can find it that way. But eventually, it will be on iTunes. I just haven't taken the time to get that done yet, but that will happen eventually. But for those of you that would rather have it in podcast form and not just on YouTube, it is there. It's on Libsyn, so check the link in the description, and you can download it on there. So I tossed around a bunch of different names, and I kept coming back to gun culture, something that had to do with gun culture, because culture in general has always been something that I found interesting. Um, and culture is just a weird thing in general when you think about it. And if you're not someone that's consumed by it, then you can't help but just find it funny in a lot of ways. I mean, there's good things about it, obviously. Just everything has its downside. I don't care what it is. Everything has an upside and a downside. Sometimes the downside is way more than the upside, and vice versa. But yeah, culture definitely has some downsides, which I will get into, maybe some on this show and just throughout all of these, I'm sure. And of course, guns. I grew up with guns. My whole life has been. I've been around guns my entire life, and there is definitely a gun culture, which is a good thing in general. It is, and there are some negative aspects of it, and a lot of the and a lot of what I want to bring to you guys is not necessarily a bunch of information on firearms, and gear, and not necessarily a lot of political stuff. I mean, as far as specific political stuff, I will be talking about gun political things quite a bit, but not specific events necessarily, which I'm sure that I will talk about some of those um, at times. But I mainly want to just talk about really the gun culture in general, everything that has to do with it, everything around it, um, how it relates to other things that aren't gun related. Because as much as I love guns, of course, my life does not revolve around guns, and I'd like to. I think there are some interesting things that can relate to the gun culture outside of it. So there's a lot of interesting things in and around the gun culture, I think, and so that's why I chose it as a title for my podcast slash radio show. Which, like I said, I'm just going to call it a radio show because honestly, the way um, it's eventually the term podcast might end up being kind of like unleaded gas. When you go and get gas, and you, I mean, when was the last time you went to a gas station and they had leaded gas? Right? But we still use the term unleaded gas. Um, Eventually, when we say podcast, it'll be like that because it's like, what do you mean radio? Like, I mean, there's podcast. It's all a podcast. What are you talking about? Maybe not. I don't know. But anyways, I digress. But so yeah, that was basically the gist of why I came up with the name. Um, so, anyways, one of the things that has become a big part of culture that's very close to home for gun people is privacy issues. Of course, I'm not going to get into any specifics on this. I'm speaking mainly in general terms. But as we all know, the whole thing with the NSA, of course, and as gun people, we don't like the idea of the same people who seem to want to limit limit the availability of certain firearms also spying on us, right? I mean, we're honest people. We're not doing anything illegal. So, why should we worry about this, right? That's all. That's the big discussion. Why should it matter if you have privacy, if you have nothing to hide or you're not doing anything illegal? Well, it's really not about that. It becomes kind of a moral issue. Um, like it's sad to think that we live in a society that it comes back. What it always comes back to, it seems like, is freedom over safety, right? It seems like that's what it always comes back to. So apparently now, and who knows how long, we have lived in a society where freedom is less important than safety, because of course the justification for um, this supposed, which I'm going to say supposed, right? Because I think there's too much. There's too many people who are claiming to know things just because the media says it, or whoever it is says it, doesn't necessarily make it true, right? I may not always use the term supposed, but I'm very open to anything being true or untrue. Even something that seems so obvious as this, but it does seem like that's probably what's happening. That we are being spied on to an extent by our government. It does seem like that's probably the case. Um, so the problem with that is because the justification for it, of course, is it's for our safety. They're spying on us because terrorism or whatever it is that they say, that it keeps us safer. Well, then it becomes kind of a that becomes kind of the question that always comes up: safety over freedom. Now, I would rather have freedom. Now, obviously, there are some boundaries. When it comes to that, we don't want to live in a society where only the strongest survive, because then whoever has the most guns controls everything, and it's just constant warfare, right? We don't want that, of course, but we also don't want to feel like the people that we are putting in place to uh, say protect us, but the people that we're putting in place that we're trusting to manage our society are almost like viewing us as the enemy when they spy on us without giving us the benefit of the doubt. And it's almost like the whole innocent until proven guilty thing. I mean, I don't feel like I'm being treated as innocent whenever I'm being spied on, right? If my phone is being hacked and there's no justification for it other than I'm just an American citizen, then it kind of feels like I'm not too innocent until proven guilty, right? It's kind of how it feels to me. Um, so that's kind of crazy, and it makes sense why us gun people, should be concerned about it. But here's the thing too. Who knows how long this has been going on. There's no need to worry about it. Speak about it, inform people, make sure that people don't forget it, vote remembering it, right? But don't sit around and worry about it. Don't sit around and think, oh, I can't say this over a phone conversation, or this might happen, or oh man, if I buy too many guns this week, maybe the black helicopters are going to show up in my front yard. Don't think like that. Don't let them control your personal sense of freedom, right? Make sure that freedom is internal. That's something that's important to me. Freedom is internal. Don't let them shake your internal sense of freedom. Don't, right? Be active. Be active to get some of these things changed that we don't like, but don't let them affect your internal freedom. Uh, that's not good for you. That's not good for anybody. And then there's another interesting side of freedom, or I mean, of privacy also, because there's a darker side of privacy. While we don't want to feel like we're being spied on, we want to feel like we can, keep our privacy through our emails and all those kinds of things. Privacy becomes a sort of a prison also at the same time, because let's say hypothetically that there was no such thing as privacy. everyone knew everything about everyone, including the government. I mean, it's based on now, it sounds kind of crazy, but if you think about it, once everyone got used to it, then really it would be a pretty free environment because we would know everything the government's doing, so we have nothing to worry about with the government. We have nothing to be afraid of. Everybody knows what they're up to. Um, no one has any skeletons in their closet because all their skeletons are out in the front yard, right? So, uh, right, so you can see how, in a hypothetical sense, that privacy almost is like a prison in a weird sort of way. So to me, I've always found privacy an interesting issue because it's just like this really weird kind of thing where it's almost like a Mexican standoff. It's like you want it because other people want it, but if nobody has it, then you don't really need it. You know what I mean? It's kind of strange, but in the current state of our culture, privacy is very important. I think it's very important. And I think that in the state of our culture and our system and all that kind of stuff, I think privacy does equal freedom in that sense. But I think looking at the dark side of privacy is kind of an interesting thing too. But I don't think we're really there. We're not there to where we want to start giving up our privacy, of course. So privacy is definitely a good thing. And when you vote, when you contact your congressman, remember that. Remember that you didn't really like getting treated like you were guilty, right? It's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. I don't like the idea of being treated like I'm guilty, right, before I even do anything. One thing, I don't know if you guys have this in your town or not, but here in Nashville, they have this thing called the Just Busted. It's like this publication, right? And yeah, it seems all fun. Oh, look at these idiots. But in a way, that really goes against the Constitution, in my opinion. That you can just be arrested, right? Not actually convicted of anything, and all of a sudden your face is on this publication that anyone can buy at a Minute Mart for $1. And maybe you didn't do anything. Maybe you were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and all of a sudden your life is basically turned upside down. You've lost your job. You've lost the respect of your friends and your family. No one's gonna believe you whenever, oh, yeah, he got, yeah, did you hear what Bill did? Nobody remembers what the outcome of your situation was. They just remember the worst part. All right, so that's just, and that even happens too when something gets played on the news, right? Someone gets, I don't know, especially when you're talking about more serious issues like sex crimes and things like that. It can just ruin someone. Someone that was innocent, that didn't even do anything, can just be ruined by a publication like that or a news story or something like that. The news stories, I mean, that's kind of a tough one, but those publications though, that doesn't seem right. To me, that's the same kind of attack on the whole the whole innocent till proven guilty thing as the spying supposedly by the NSA. So I don't know. It's something to think about and to be aware of for sure. And I'm sure I'll have many more talks on this topic. This is the kind of topic you can't just cover in one segment on a radio show for sure. And as we are constantly being hurled into the future, I think we will see the issue of privacy become more and more and more complex, especially as technology increases. And speaking of future stuff, one thing that I think that I have a lot of fun thinking about and have thought about for a long time, Dad and I have had lots of conversations about this, is where the future of guns is heading. Now, some of you may have heard my laser trigger thing in the last show, which I definitely think that's going to happen eventually. I think there will be some type of trigger mechanism that takes trigger control out of the situation completely. I don't know whether it be an actual laser that you interrupt or a signal or something basically that enables you to activate the firing mechanism of the gun without any type of resistance whatsoever, so that your sights are not brought off target at all. No flinching. No one will ever flinch ever in the future. Flinching will become extinct. So I do think that that's something that's going to happen. I think that it seems to me, even though there's a lot of course, support for larger bullets and things of recent, there's been a lot people coming out with 50 caliber, calibers in the AR rifles, and was it the 50 Beowulf, something like that, and all these different, and I think there's a 50 caliber round for that can be chambered in the Glock. I forget what it's called, but there has been a lot of course, big rounds that have come out, 500 Magnum, all these kinds of rounds and stuff like that. But honestly, to me, where I see bullets going is smaller and faster. I think that even though kind of recently it's kind of seemed the opposite, I think eventually when we're talking about the next 50 years, 100 years, I think we're going to start seeing bullets get a lot smaller and a lot faster. And you're going to have rifles that hold, you think of a high capacity magazine, or as they call it, standard capacity magazine. Of course, what it really is, it holds 30 rounds. That's going to be like what we think of as like a 5-round magazine now. Standard will be like 100 rounds, and handguns, and there'll be rifles probably that hold like 300 and 400 rounds, and there'll be these like little bitty bullets that are like 22 shorts looking things, or smaller even, and they'll just scream out of those rifles, just scream out of there at like 4,000 feet per second, 5,000 feet per second, stuff like that. Just be extremely devastating rounds. And of course they'll have to change body armor, will have to progress along with that. It'll change warfare tactics dramatically. But I think that's where guns are heading. And then I think pretty soon after guns really get to like kind of that point where they've really advanced almost to their threshold, to where something new is going to have to be developed, like some kind of laser or something, something other than your typical cartridge with some type of projectile and a powder encased in some type of metal being put into a tube and closed off in the back. I think we're going to eventually get away from that, obviously, as time goes on. But I think before that happens, we will probably see strictly mechanized warfare. I think basically what will happen is robot technology and artificial intelligence will progress to where if countries are fighting big wars, which they're sure to do in the future, unfortunately, it will be done basically by robots, I think. So it'll be whoever has the biggest and baddest robots, basically. And of course, this all makes us think of the Terminator movies and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. When it comes to the whole thing about technology becoming self-aware, that's a pretty heavy one. That kind of comes down to just how you think the world works. Maybe not. Who knows? But I'm not really going to get into that right now. But I do think that eventually we're going to have we already have drones that have become a huge part of warfare. Eventually, it's going to be drones versus other drones, and everyone will be sitting back playing video games, basically killing each other's machines. And when one side wins and destroys all the other side's machines, what happens then? I don't know, but I do think that's how it's going to go. So smaller, faster bullets all the way up until basically you don't even have the foot soldier anymore. Of course, there will still be a need for firearms, of course, because you can't just carry a drone around with you. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can carry one in a backpack, some kind of attack drone, and someone tries to rob you in the street, you pull out your controller and fly it out of there or something. Who knows? But I hope there's always a place for handheld firearms, in our culture, just to keep personal freedoms alive, because there will always be people who want to do you harm. There just will. There will always be that. And some type of projectile launching device seems like the best way to go for me in defending myself until they invent some kind of just mega stun gun. Which that's another interesting topic that I didn't plan on talking about is what if let's say they invented some kind of special gun. It's like a taser, let's say, like the taser guns, except it didn't have a limited range. It actually could fire a real bullet per se, with all the accuracy that modern handguns have, and all the range and all that kind of stuff, capacity, all that's the same. The difference is it's not actually a lethal round. Just somehow when it impacts the person, it just fully incapacitates them somehow. Just say hypothetically, I don't know how that would work, but let's say that technology came here. Would we use it? Would we trust it? That's something that's interesting to think about. When I was working in security, of course, there was a lot of talk about the taser guns and all that kind of stuff. We were kind of a low budget company to an extent. So we didn't have tasers or anything. And there was a lot of talk about, should we get them, should we not? I was never crazy about the taser guns because, I mean, some of you guys in law enforcement out there know a lot more about this probably than me, but at least what it seemed like to me was there really weren't many situations where you needed the taser because you couldn't get what you had to get done without it, and then you didn't need your firearm. To me, there was just not a big enough gap there, because if someone is presenting you with such a danger that you need to shoot this projectile of like an insane amount of voltage through them, basically paralyzing them temporarily, you might need your gun. Because a taser, you basically have, I think there's some of them you got like 3 shots maybe, but I mean, they're kind of a crapshoot. Depending on what they hit, they might not even work. You miss, I mean, they might malfunction. I don't know how reliable those things are. I don't know, there's a lot of variables there. And if someone is really presenting that type of, I wouldn't tase someone unless I really felt like they were about to cause serious bodily harm or death to me or someone else. And in that case, I would probably use my sidearm. So I don't really see a lot of use for the taser gun necessarily. But I kind of got off topic there. But some of you guys that are out there that are in law enforcement can school me on that, I guess. But that's just kind of how it seemed to me when I was working security. And one thing too, speaking of the future, technically we're in the future right now as they would see it in even 1975 or 1875. All right, this is the future. And one thing I've always thought about is what would happen if you took modern guns back to the past, right? Like, what if you had a group of guys, like 5 or 6 of you, and you all had ARs or AKs, whatever, and you had a backpack full of magazines and all that kind of stuff, plenty of ammo, and you went back to like 1863 or something like that, and you found yourself in the Civil War. Just think about what an impact weapons like that would have had back then. Or let's say you went back to the Wild West days, some of those rough cow towns with an AR-15, 1,000 rounds of ammo all loaded in mags. Man, that's just crazy to think about. But still, you're not necessarily impervious. I mean, the thing is, the weapon would be outstandingly powerful for those times, but then again, the downside of it would be that if you made a lot of enemies, they would figure out some way to get you. And unless you were just gonna stay awake for the whole time you were there. I mean, that's the thing, you become a really big target when you have too good of a weapon. It's one downside, but I've always thought that was interesting though. I mean, just think, even if you went back to the Civil War and gave one side even just trapdoor Springfields, how different it would have been. It's just amazing when you think about how, when you take a time period and then the technology that is developed even just slightly after, right? Like the Henry rifle basically was developed right around the beginning, I think, of the Civil War. Before, I forget the history on that, but what if that had come out just a little bit before? it would have completely possibly rewrote history, possibly, or maybe it would happen the same, but just in a different way. It's crazy when you think about it, how just a technology just a couple of years after, if you took it back 2 or 3 years before or 10 years before, how it would just dramatically rewrite history. So it's just crazy, crazy to think that how fast our technology moves and everything. Another thing too that's funny to think about is what if you went back in time, like to the cowboy days, let's say, like 1884 or something like that, in some rough cow town. But you couldn't bring anything with you. You just had whatever was there, but you had all the modern tactics. Let's say you took like a Navy SEAL or something, from today and went back there. What kind of advantages would he have? Would those mountain men coming out of the hills, would they be way tougher than the average Navy SEAL nowadays, or would there be no comparison? That's an interesting thought, because some of those guys back in those days had to be pretty tough. I mean, they were up there back when there was grizzly bears all over this area, up there in the hills, surviving and trapping. I mean, man, those guys had to be tough. But who knows? Maybe they're not even anywhere near as tough as our elite military forces now, or maybe they're a lot tougher. Who knows? But that's an interesting thought. Going back to the cowboy days, using the weaver stance and all that kind of stuff is just interesting to think about. Slicing the pie around corners. I wonder if they knew about all that stuff back then. But they'd probably think you were from another planet or something, doing all that stuff, even if you had the same guns and the same clothes. But I would say it would definitely give you an advantage, because just like weapons evolve, so do tactics, and that makes a pretty big difference too. Not as big of a difference probably as weapons technology, but it does make some difference, that's for sure. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and do the album recommendation of the show. And this is probably one that some of you guys have been waiting for a long time for me to do, and that is Master of Puppets by Metallica. And I will say it is not absolutely my favorite Metallica album. Probably Ride the Lightning is, but I mean it's probably a close second. I mean that album is just something else. I mean, it just smashes you from start to finish. I mean, just utterly smashes you. I mean, I challenge you to listen to the song Master of Puppets on the album Master of Puppets, and at that part where it goes into like the little, like the softer guitar part where it kind of slows down for a minute, and then whenever it starts coming back heavy, I dare you to listen to that song and not make a scary face. Listen to that song, that part of that song, and don't have a scary look on your face. I dare you to do it, and I bet you can't. I don't think it's possible. I don't think anybody could do that. But if you can, I will be extremely impressed. But yeah, that's just a great album. Smashes you start to finish. In my vinyl collection, it's actually the only Metallica album that I have right now. They're really tricky to find in the shops. Basically, you have to order them online, which is where I got one of them, because I actually have two, ironically, copies of that. One of them I ordered online. It's like I'm pretty sure it's I think it's a first pressing. It doesn't have the barcode on the back of it, which that album was produced like right at the kind of the end of when they first started putting barcodes. When they were putting barcodes on every album, I think in '86 is when they started doing that. So it's definitely an early one if it's not a very first pressing of it. And then the other one I got, which actually to date is my most valuable piece in my vinyl collection. The other one I have is one I bought in a store, and they had it hanging up on the wall on display because it was kind of special. They didn't just have it sitting out in the boxes to thumb through. It's a promo, first of all, which makes them more valuable. And it has this sticker on it, which I can't read you the sticker because it has some profane language on it, and I'm trying to keep my show clean. But if you're curious about what the sticker says, just look it up online, because there's a sticker that they put on a few of the copies of Master of Puppets that was kind of like a stab at the at the censorship stuff that was going on around that time. I think that was when they started censoring music. Um, so they put a sticker on there as kind of like a screw you to the record companies, basically. And they only put that on a few of them, so it makes them kind of valuable. And I saw that sitting there up on the wall in a display case, and I was like, I have to have that. That's a piece of Metallica history right there. That's got to be mine. So so I went home with it. But yeah, that great album, great album. If you like heavy metal at all, I mean, it's in a way it's like the holy grail of '80s thrash metal. It's a lot of ways just a great album. And yeah, can't go wrong with it. I'm gonna get back on the topic of freedom for a little bit, which, as you may notice, is a pretty common topic here on our radio show. Maybe it's a little important. I don't know. But yeah, speaking of freedom, one thing that happens a lot, well, people talk about, of course, freedom of speech, right? That's a big one. That's a huge one to all of us. It's almost, in some ways, almost one of the most important ones. But something that, so people are very serious about that. Whenever they feel like their freedom of speech is being limited by the government or something like that, people are very serious about it, as they should be. But one thing that people aren't very serious about is the way that most of our speech is limited, basically, and that's by each other, right? So it seems to me like we don't really have freedom of speech, which I know that's kind of sounds like a bad thing to say, but we don't have freedom of speech. Now the government recognizes freedom of speech; they're supposed to, at least, and they typically do. It seems like, for the most part, but we don't recognize each other's freedom of speech. We don't let people. Now I'm not speaking to everyone, of course, but in general, people only like to hear things that they agree with. Whenever someone says something that sounds crazy to them, immediately they just dismiss it, don't even respect their opinion, act like, what is that person even thinking for saying something that's so crazy like that? Instead of just seeing it as an idea. That doesn't mean you can't argue. I mean, I argue with people all the time. It's just that people are made afraid to voice their opinions because it's so easy to lose all of your credibility because you said something that goes against the normal things that people say. So in a nutshell, we limit our own freedom of speech more than the government ever could. Well, not that they ever could, but that they ever have. So try to keep that in mind when someone says something that sounds crazy. I mean, sometimes people say things that are just crazy. I mean, but sometimes people say some things that are pretty interesting that only sound crazy at first, and they only sound crazy to your point of view. Everybody has a different point of view. And the only thing we can possibly know is our own point of view. So when you hear something that sounds crazy, that means that it comes from a different point of view. So that would be pretty important for you to listen to, because maybe it's worth something and maybe it'll help enhance your point of view. Or it might just be total nonsense, which happens a lot. Anybody can say anything they want. But let's not limit our own freedom of speech. And like I said, it just, like for example, the scientific community has to be careful about what they study, because if they study certain things, then they basically lose all of their credibility, and none of their science will be respected anymore. But science is all about exploration. So you mean to tell me that science can't explore everything? If they explore something, there's certain things that they explore, and then all their other explorations don't mean anything? That doesn't make any sense. So we just need to mainly just be aware that let's not cut our own throats, right? Let's not limit our own free speech. Let people say what they want. Let's not judge them for that and try to discredit them. If you don't like what they're saying, just ignore them. But let people feel comfortable with saying things that they believe. That creates a lot of problems in our society. I think when people are just afraid to say what they believe. There's a lot of things that people say that I just don't agree with. But I love the fact that at least they feel comfortable saying those things. But I hate when I see someone say something, and maybe it's something I don't agree with either, but I hate it whenever I see someone being just totally dismissed and discredited, um, for just one of their beliefs being kind of out there when the other things that they say make sense. Um, Now, I mean, I get the reasoning. If someone says something crazy, then it's like, oh, everything they say must be crazy. Well, crazy is relative. Uh, if you haven't heard something before, like I've talked about this before, um, something is going to sound crazy if it's not like anything you've ever heard before, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's crazy. I mean, if you have never seen the ocean or never heard of the ocean before, you lived in a cave, and then someone took you to the ocean, or someone told you about the ocean, right? They came inside your cave and was like, hey, there's this thing where this, that water stuff that you drink, yeah, like most of the earth is covered with it. And there's this place where you can go where it meets, where water meets dirt, and it just moves up and down, and there's all these fish and everything. You're crazy. That's impossible. They could never get that much of it in one spot. That is insane. Get out of here. So crazy is just something that goes outside of what you normally hear, and sometimes it sounds crazy because it's just wrong, or sometimes maybe it sounds crazy just because you never thought about that before. So it's something to keep in mind. Let's not limit our own freedom of speech. Let's not cut our own throats. Let's all be in this together and share ideas. I think that's important. It's easy enough for us to lose our freedoms, over something really small. So let's not lose at least our freedom of speech. And a good example of that is, I was thinking about this the other day because I have a couple of full-size ARs, and I have a pistol AR that's classified as a pistol. Now, if I took that pistol upper and put it on one of my rifle lowers, I'm automatically a felon. Of course, I would never do that. But if I did that, I'm a felon. But theoretically, I could take that pistol lower off, and I could have both the rifle version and the pistol version. I could have the upper and lower separated. I could lay on the floor the rifle lower, and then I could set the pistol upper into position right next to it, an inch away from each other, where it basically kind of creates an SBR, but without actually being attached. So I could do that, and there would be nothing wrong with that, because I'm just storing my gun parts on the floor. That's not illegal, at least right now. But literally, I am an inch away from my life being ruined. Literally. If I walked across the floor and tripped, and they snapped together, and then an ATF agent walked in the door, I'm done. My life is ruined. It's over. Right? Can't get a job. You can get convicted of a felony. It's really hard to get a job anywhere. You can't even get an apartment hardly. I mean, it ruins your life. I mean, it's crazy. You can't buy a gun again. Your family is gonna. I mean, it depends on what the situation is, but family might disown you. I mean, basically, it ruins your life getting convicted of a felony. And it's kind of scary how easy it is, and how it's just something so benign and just and simple that could ruin your life, literally. I mean, that's just crazy to me. I mean, really, when you think about it, like, what does that do? How does that make the world such a more dangerous place because I shortened the barrel of my rifle? I mean, that's just insane. I mean, it's just crazy when you actually think about it, how close you can be to just ruining your life over something so simple like that. Now, you're not really close to it. You think about, you don't have to do it, obviously, and you're not going to trip, and it's too complicated of a thing. It's not, there's no chance of it accidentally happening, right? So, okay, you're not really that close to it, but still, though, it's still just crazy to me, those laws and how easy it is to become a felon when it has to do with guns. And another thing is, like, if you had a shotgun, 18-inch barrel, and then you just sawed the barrel off. If you told me 1,000 years ago, hey, in the future, if you saw a certain metal tube in half, then you're going to go to jail. They're going to lock you in a cage for like 10 years for that. You'd go, what? Yeah, that's a nice joke. You know? I mean, it's just crazy. And of course, the reasoning for those laws is makes it easier for criminals to conceal legal firearms, right? Because criminals are very concerned with having legal firearms in commissions of crimes. I don't understand why do people support laws that control thought? Because in a way, that's kind of how a lot of these laws are. They control your thoughts, because the implication is you're not supposed to have this thing, because this thing could convince you of committing a crime. That's basically what these laws are all about, right? A lot of these gun laws, SBR laws, a lot of these different ones. There's a lot of laws that fall into this category that doesn't have anything to do with guns. The laws are in place to prevent you from being in a situation where you would be tempted to commit a crime, or would make it easier for you to commit a crime based on their understanding. So it's mind control, basically. It's a law against your mind, essentially, is what it is. Because it's you ultimately that makes the decision to commit to hurt someone. Because the ultimate goal, right, is for society to be safe, right, and somewhat productive, roads to be kept up, all that kind of stuff. But as far as laws go, they're to keep people safe and keep people fair from being exploited financially and all that. Right? So why aren't those laws fine? Why do we have to make all these laws to control how people think? We have to make sure that they don't ever get into a position where they might think about committing a crime. That's just crazy. It's like being treated like a child in a lot of ways, is the way I see that. Those laws treat us like children, the SBR laws, and any law that controls your thought and not actually the actual commission of a violent crime, like assault or whatever it is. So yeah, that's not news to you guys. Those SBR laws, especially the SBR laws, when it comes to NFA stuff, are just insane. And then the whole NFA Act thing too is just crazy. Someone got in their head somewhere, sometime that fully automatics are just so much more dangerous and deadly, and it's just it's crazy. It'd be nice someday. Maybe we can get that reversed one day. But it's funny. That reminds me of, I don't know if any of you guys if you guys are familiar with George Carlin, but he's one of my favorite comedians. But it reminds me of a really funny George Carlin quote where he said, "The invention of the flamethrower proves that someone, somewhere, sometimes once said, 'Hey, I would like to see those guys over there on fire, but I'm just not close enough to get the job done.'" And that was just great. I love that. I always thought that was funny. And we've got to make sure, because of these crazy laws, that we're continuing, even though things are pretty chilled out right now when it comes to our gun rights. We've got to keep the fight going. We got to keep it up, because there's things we want more. We don't want to just keep the things away. We want to get rid of some of these just crazy laws that are on the books now. But we got to make sure that we're doing it in the right ways too. We have to make sure that we're educated. We have to make sure that we're really thinking about our stances and our positions on Second Amendment issues, and that we've looked at them objectively, and that we're also representing the gun community really well. That's really important. We've got anyone who owns a gun is responsible for representing the gun community, I think. And anytime that someone doesn't do that, they're working against us. Whether they think they're on our side or not, they are working against us when they don't represent us well. And of course, a hot button issue in the gun culture lately has been some of these open carry gun rallies and all this kind of stuff. Look, I get it, right? You're pointing out, like it was some group in Texas, you're pointing out how insane it is that you can't open carry a handgun by carrying a rifle because that's legal. I get that. That makes sense on one level. It makes sense. But on another level, it does not make sense, because what it's doing is it's making us look bad. Like, regardless of what the reason for that is, it doesn't matter what the reason for that is, or how you can logically articulate the reason for that public protest. The effect that it's having is negative. It seems to be purely a negative effect, and that's a problem. I think we need to revisit some of those kinds of tactics and rethink them, because it's not helping. It's not. I mean, that's not good. I don't think. We don't want to scare people. There are a lot of people out there who are frightened by guns because they don't understand them, or for whatever reason. We don't want to incite those people, is the thing, because those people are kind of, they may or may not be against us or even care, really, right? So we want to put ourselves out there, but in a positive light that everybody can kind of understand, to the best that we can. We don't want to go overboard trying to scare people, right? That's not good. Even if we're not trying to scare people. I mean, if you walk into some kind of fast food restaurant with an AR slung over your back, I mean, yeah, in a perfect world, it'd be nice if that was not a big deal, but we're not there yet. And as of right now, it doesn't help anything. It just doesn't. I just don't think that helps us. It helps our cause and helps us keep and get back our gun rights. I just don't see at this point that it does. I support that organization's cause that's doing that. I just don't necessarily support their methods. I know they've taken a lot of heat for that. I'm not trying to just pile on, but I think it needs to be rethought. I think, because it doesn't. I don't think it's helping it. Let's say maybe it helps them. It definitely doesn't help everybody. It doesn't help the whole country. We've really got to think about everybody to the best that we can. We want New Jersey to get their gun rights back just as important as we want Texas to get theirs, the ones that they want. So, it's a national effort, and we've got to always be putting our best foot forward and really representing ourselves really well. I don't mean to get too preachy about all that stuff, but it's important when it comes to keeping our rights and getting some of these just crazy laws off the books. It's just really important. And I'll admit, sometimes I get a little preachy on the radio shows that I do solo. It's hard not to, because I don't have anyone else to talk to back and forth. And that's why I try to give you guys some variety whenever I have my friend Derek on. Which let you guys let me know how you feel about those episodes. And if you guys really like that, if you like him coming on, I'll try to get him on more if I can. And I may have some other people on too at some point. But I don't want to have necessarily the typical gun industry radio show guests on. I want to just kind of get some different random people and things, because I just kind of want this show to be just an interesting conversation about anything in and around guns. I'm not really interested in telling you about the latest and greatest gun products. You can get all that stuff anywhere. I just kind of want to almost self-reflect on the gun culture that is us, basically. So anyways, I guess this kind of concludes this week's episode. But I hope you guys enjoyed it, and continue watching the videos, and we hopefully are still putting out some videos that you guys find interesting. We're putting out videos that we find interesting, at least, and that's how we've always done it. So anyways, we appreciate every one of you guys, and we will talk to you next time.